Mel, Van Silk in the place to be. So let's all fight crack with WNBC. Let's all help stop the misery. So don't do it.
The 1980s saw a significant increase in the use of crack cocaine, or crack, in the United States. Crack was popularized because of its affordability, immediate euphoric effect, and profitability. Compared with cocaine, crack is a much cheaper drug. Inner-city Americans made and bought this drug and became associated with minority people, specifically blacks. But how did America get to this point where this drug gripped American inner-city communities, spreading fear and devastation?
A drug so powerful it will empty the money from your pockets, make you sell the watch off your wrist, the clothes off your back, or kill your mother.
Yep. This is the most addicting thing that probably ever existed in the world, you know?
Violate every principle, every value, everything they hold dear to them when they get hooked on that.
Treatment centers for crack addicts are getting crowded, and in some cases, there is a wait just to get in. CNN's Al Sunshine has a report.
I went back out and did more. I knew that I needed help, but I didn't know who to go to. You know, I told my parents that I was on drugs and that I was stealing from them and robbing houses and stuff like that.
Cocaine was first promoted as a healing elixir. Sigmund Freud promoted cocaine as a tonic to cure depression and sexual impotence. He prescribed cocaine to all of his friends as a magical substance. The popularity increased further when John Pemberton included cocaine as a major ingredient in his new soft drink, Coca-Cola. Although highly dangerous, the energizing effects of the consumer helped skyrocket the popularity of his soft drink. Pressure from the medical community forced Coca-Cola to remove cocaine from its soft drink. This didn't stop cocaine's popularity from rising, however. As use in society increased, and the devastating effects on people were more and more shown. Although banned in 1922, the overall popularity began to fizzle out. However, cocaine made a grand resurgence in the 1970s, emerging as a fashionable new drug for entertainers and business people. The percentage of students who used it at universities increased tenfold between 1970 and 1980 as well. Further, elaborate networks for smuggling cocaine into the U.S., created by Colombian drug traffickers, began to get set up. And thus emerges crack. With all this recognition of cocaine as a rich man's drug, a new offshoot known as crack became popularized within inner-city communities. Crack got its name from the crackling sound the rock makes when it's heated to produce crack. Crack produces a much more euphoric and direct effect than cocaine. Further, whereas cocaine is typically snorted or injected, crack is typically smoked. In general, it is much more accessible to poorer communities.
Mel, Van Silk in the place to be. So let's help fight crack with WNBC. Don't buy it, don't try it, don't touch it, don't take it. Get with it, hop to it, yeah. Don't do it.
Don't do it!
How did crack specifically emerge in inner-city communities and black communities? Well, there was a structural shift starting during Ronald Reagan's presidency that caused huge manufacturing industries to move outside of cities. This relocation further widened the socioeconomic gap between communities in America. Crack is a very easy drug to make and sell, requiring few skills and resources. Many small-time drug dealers worked independently and outside the control of organizations like the cartel. Violence emerged as drug dealers fought for territories and economic boundaries. These inner-city competitions were a hallmark of the crack epidemic, specifically its effect on the black inner-city communities.
No matter where I'm at, I got crack. Started from the trap, now I rap. Tell 'em, no matter where I'm at.
Crack emerged in communities where a majority of black people resided. They were already stricken with poverty and social inequalities, so the introduction of crack exacerbated these already existing problems because it was a cheap drug that was highly addictive. Those in poverty turned to the crack industry and kept it alive and running. The response from the police and law enforcement disproportionately targeted these communities, and created unfair sentencing compared with almost an identical drug called cocaine. According to American addiction centers, cocaine and crack are chemically the same substance. It was the way it was ingested that makes it different. So why was there a difference in the penalties associated with these two drugs? According to Congress, they provided the following reasons for why crack had a higher penalty. First, crack cocaine was thought to be more addictive than cocaine. It was associated with violent crime. In addition, they said the youth were most likely to be drawn to crack. Finally, it was inexpensive and therefore more likely to be consumed in large quantities. However, even after numerous studies that demonstrated that crack was no more addictive than cocaine, the sentencing disparity was still not lessened. The Los Angeles Times commented, there was never any scientific basis for the disparity. In the same vein, the U.S. Sentencing Commission found that no class of drug is as racially skewed as crack in terms of number of offenses. In 2009, 79% of crack offenders were black. Only 28% of offenders were white, and 53% were Hispanic. Combined with a 115-month average imprisonment for crack offenses and an average 87 months for cocaine offenses, the sentencing disparity results in more African Americans spending more time in the prison system. All these statistics and information reveal that these disparities were as a result of deep-rooted racism in American society and the want of the American government to incarcerate and target Black Americans.
Crack cocaine, I've been up for days. It's that crack cocaine, suck it to my veins. It's that crack cocaine, get it out of my brain. Crack cocaine.
Don't do it. Just one of the many, many slogans that was used to raise awareness of crack usage and to encourage its avoidance. With influential figures like Whitney Houston, Clint Eastwood, and many more prominent individuals, the primary purpose was mainly to prevent people from every demographic to just not use it.
Say no to drugs and say yes to life.
Of course, your local drug pusher may tell you a little something different about these drugs, and who you believe is up to you. But then again, if you go ahead and try them, at least it won't be out of ignorance, just stupidity. What would I do if someone offered me these drugs? I'd tell them to take a hike.
The media was heavily covering the crack epidemic in the 80s, which led to a great panic surrounding the drug. There was a major bias, of course, in the media, with a big focus on the inner cities, especially black users. The media painted crack as a black drug and pointed the blame onto black people, straying away from the real issue, as they usually do, being the systemic injustices in living conditions and basic human needs that cause people of lower socioeconomic status to get onto the drug. So, around the Nixon era, starting from the Nixon presidency in the 70s, the war on drugs crippled black communities with very harsh punishments for crack users, while cocaine users who generally lived in wealthier areas were given much more lenient sentences, even though the two drugs were essentially exactly the same. The war on drugs went on throughout the 80s during Reagan's presidency. Sensationalized media coverage continued to stigmatize and demonetize crack users, predominantly blacks. This perspective of crack users and black people exacerbated this panic and led to these harsh criminal sentences where the incarceration rates nearly doubled. The mass incarceration of primarily African Americans broke down communities and contributed to the ongoing systemic injustices minorities face. The discrepancy between sentencing of crack users compared to cocaine users was 100 to 1 in the amount of grams that felons possessed. This biased media portrayal of black people that painted them as violent and dangerous reinforced negative stereotypes and led to greater racial profiling
especially in inner cities. This added to the existing racial divisions, hindered people's efforts to address the root cause of this addiction and provide addicts with the support they need.
Crack carries several severe health consequences and debilitating addiction. Crack can cause immediate health risks, including increased heart rate, elevated blood pressure, and risk of a stroke or heart attack. Frequent use of crack can lead to severe psychological effects such as anxiety, paranoia, and hallucination, as well as risky behavior. Users may also experience respiratory issues, including lung damage, chronic coughing, and other severe infections. Crack addicts develop a strong craving for the drug and experience severe withdrawal symptoms, including depression, fatigue, irritability, and constant craving of the drug. The list of detrimental effects of crack goes on, with effects on cognitive function, memory loss, and impaired decision-making abilities. All of these serious short and long-term effects make crack a dangerous drug that leads to many health complications in the future and may decrease your lifespan.
It's a world of heartache and pain. That's why I'm selling crystal love to the people. That's why I'm selling them crack cocaine.
One of the flagship national programs to combat the use of drugs in the 1980s, DARE, was an educational program initiated by the LAPD in the LA Unified School District to address the demand side of the drug epidemic. However, due to political interferences, inadequate guidance, media hysteria, and fundamental flaws in the program's intentions, DARE failed to mitigate drug use. In fact, a 1992 study at Indiana University found that participants in the program had higher rates of drug use than those not enrolled. Many schools around the country instituted zero-tolerance policies for drug use, which meant that students found with drugs were often severely punished, expelled, suspended, even turned over to the police. These policies often materially, negatively, and disproportionately affected black and brown students, pushing them out of schools, onto the streets, in many instances destroying their futures. This led to a cycle of generational trauma and poverty that continues to this day. Today, policies in schools and in the real world have gotten slightly more forgiving and have started to focus more on rehabilitation than on punishment. While the war on drugs is still very much being fought, at the ground level, things are a little bit better as the public has become more sensitive and aware of the issues and inequities pertaining to it.
Ow! I'm in love with a crackhead.
Thank you. Crack users were some of the most negatively affected by the war on drugs. Individuals convicted of drug violations involving crack were often punished with longer prison sentences than those convicted for powder cocaine possession, even though crack and cocaine are chemically the same exact substance. The only difference between them is that powder cocaine is snorted and was often used by wealthier and more powerful white people, whereas crack is smoked and was not most often used by inner city, impoverished black and brown people. In fact, some have even gone so far as to suggest that the CIA aided in the trafficking of crack in order to help fund right-wing, anti-Marxist Nicaraguan Contra rebels, destroying communities of color and filling our prisons with more black and brown people as a result. In addition, mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines for certain offenses eliminated the potential for considering extenuating circumstances in the courtroom, leading to further inequities in our justice system.
Don't listen to your friends if they tell you to try it. And most of all, y'all, don't you buy it. Your friends are wrong if they tell you to use it. So listen to the message that's in our music. Find some help if it's you who did it. Crack is real whack, so you better get with it. Don't do it. Don't do it.
So what were the lasting effects of the crack epidemic? Crack ravaged many urban, mostly black, particularly low-income populations. These neighborhoods experienced increased rates of violence, crime, and drug addiction. This increased a sense of social and political insecurity, where people couldn't trust their neighbors, police force, politicians, and many others associated with this epidemic. Further, the government's response to the crack epidemic was mainly focused on law enforcement and destructive measures. Harsh sentencing laws like mandatory minimums and 3 strikes law led to a system of systemic injustices of minority-led incarcerations. The families torn apart by this racist system of jailing continue to impact these communities to this day. Finally, the intergenerational effects are astounding. The babies from the mothers that took crack were more likely to be born with cognitive and physical disabilities. Further, according to NPR, scientific specialists within the crack epidemic believe crack babies are more likely to develop addictions to crack if ingested. Effects on minority communities as a result of crack are astounding. Because of racist policing, policies, and systemic injustices, the legacy of the crack epidemic continues to be felt in these inner-city minority communities.
Crack makes you insane, and crack is real whack cause it kills your brain. Creates total destruction to all that's good, your friends, your family, and your neighborhood. It could cause a young girl to abuse her body, make a man lose his job cause he loves to party. The lady can't sleep, cracking all night long. The little baby's going hungry cause the money is gone. So for me and Van Silk and Melly Mel and me, we're gonna help fight crack with WNBC. So don't do it. Don't do it.